Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sunday's Other Scriptures for November 10th. I'm continuing a series of sermons on the essential differences between those who follow Christ and those who do not. Last week it was about character. This week it's about commitment for reasons that become obvious when you take a look at our readings that are assigned for the day. Our first reading is taken from 1 Kings 17. It's the story of Elijah, who has to flee from Israel because he has announced to King Ahab, who is a wicked king of Israel, the northern kingdom, he has announced to Ahab that there is going to be a drought, that the Lord is going to shut up the skies, the clouds. It won't rain until Elijah says it should rain. And this gives him a great deal of leverage against Ahab. But Ahab, of course, is going to try and kill Elijah because that's the kind of guy that Ahab is. So Elijah has to flee the country. First, he flees to a ravine, and the Lord takes care of him there. But as the drought drags on, the Lord sends him to Zarephath, which is in the region of Sidon. Sidon is to the north of Israel, and to this day it's to the north of Israel. The city is still extant in Lebanon now. And he goes there to a poor widow whom God tells him has been commanded to feed him, even though there's a drought. And when he gets there, this widow is drawing some water, and he asks her for a drink. So far, so good. But then he asks her for some food, and she says, honestly, I'm just about to go home and use the last of my flour and oil to feed myself and my son. It's all we have left, and then we're going to die. And Elijah tells her, don't be afraid. Do this. Make a cake for me first, and then do as you say, feed your son. And the Lord has told me that you won't run out of oil, or you won't run out of uh, uh, flour. and and this is what she does because she trusts in him. It's interesting because she is a foreigner. From Elijah's perspective, Elijah is actually the foreigner. He's in a foreign land. And you can tell because she says, as sure as the Lord your God lives, not my God, your God. She's familiar with the God of Israel, and she's obedient to the God of Israel, even though it's not really her God at this point. And so she does this, and she never runs out of oil, and she never runs out of flour. She has this perpetual food generating jars for both. And throughout this long drought, it lasts about 3 years, she is able to feed herself and her son and Elijah. And there's some other adventures that follow. But this is a great example of someone's commitment to God. It's not even her God, and yet she is willing to give her the last of her food. And that's a very high level of commitment. Everything that she has left, she shares it with the prophet of God just because he is a prophet of God. Our responsive reading for the day is Psalm 146. This is a psalm of praise in which it talks about not trusting in human princes, which continues to be so much our temptation, is to trust in human saviors, to trust in the government, or if you don't trust in the government, you trust in your neighbors, you trust in your firearms, you trust in everything except the true God. And it talks to us about the advantage of trusting in the true God. First of all, he made the heavens and the earth. He can certainly take care of you, but beyond that, he's faithful, and he is compassionate to the vulnerable, to those who are widows, those who are fatherless, to the foreigner. There's a tie-in to our first reading, and he frustrates the plans of the wicked. So this is what we celebrate together by speaking to one another, this ancient psalm of Israel. Then we get to our epistle reading, which is taken from Hebrews. We've been kind of off and on doing a series of readings through the letter to the Hebrews. In this section, the author is writing about the fact that Jesus is our great high priest. He's the one who went before God for us, and how he's superior to any Jewish high priest or any temple worship because he is the once and for all sacrifice. And the argument is made that, year after year, the high priest has to go into the Holy of Holies, and they have to sacrifice, incense and bread and animal after animal after animal as atonement, as covering over our sins. But Jesus was the once and for all sacrifice, and that changes everything. And so Jesus died once and for all for us. We're no longer under the law, and he will appear a second time. It's interesting. It says at the end of the ages, he came and sacrificed himself. So when is he coming back? Well, apparently there's one additional age that we're in right now. It's often called the age of the church. It runs from the time that Jesus ascended into heaven and will terminate when Jesus comes back. That will be the final age. And in that time, he will come not to bear our sin as he did the first time, but to bring us salvation. So I have some interesting questions that get raised by that passage. And then I'm going to be preaching on our gospel reading, which is from Mark's gospel, the 12th chapter. And Jesus is talking about the commitment of the teachers of the law, which is to themselves. They, as very religious people, they appear as if they're highly committed to God. They do these long, elaborate, impressive prayers, but they're actually committed to themselves. And you can tell by they walk around with these big flowing robes to make everybody know that they are an impressive teacher of the law. And they like to be greeted in the marketplace. They like to be popular and have the most important seat at the synagogue and places of honor at banquets. But inside and secretly, Jesus says, devour the houses of widows. Now, I doubt that they had reverse mortgages yet in Jesus' day, but what does that mean? Well, these teachers of the law didn't have a paid position the way that the priests did, and they were reliant on people's gifts, and they would manipulate people to give. They were kind of the original televangelists, right? Who tend to prey on people who are very poor and very desperate and don't know any better and have respect for these religious authorities. Then as now, they had no qualms about taking away from widows what little they had left in donations. And Jesus says such men will be punished most severely. And then he takes his apostles and they sit down in the temple where people are giving their temple offering, and he points out a widow who is a contrast to those who prey on widows. She has come to the temple, and even though her offering is not impressive, unlike in our day, everybody apparently saw what people gave, and she had just two tiny pennies. But Jesus said, do you see what she put in? She, out of her poverty, gave everything she had to live on. He said other people give out of their wealth. She gave out of her poverty. And this is the type of commitment that God respects. It's commitment where we trust him entirely. It's not that he needs our money. It's that we need to put our trust in him, as the psalmist said, rather than putting our trust in human princes, our own wealth, or anything else. We are to be committed to his kingdom. And that's what I'm going to be talking about. That's what I hope you're going to be talking about. The Lord bless your study this week.